All right, hey gang, Sam back with you here. We're Thursday. What are you? April 12th, Thursday, April 12th. We're mid morning here, and as I always will mention to you, the voting amongst and the polling that we do amongst members, which is how we determine what we're going to review here in video. And no surprise today, we're getting a lot of requests to take a look at Bitcoin. So I have Bitcoin here, as we've now seen some action that seems to be getting us out of this range that we've been stuck in. So I have Bitcoin here to the dollar on Bitfinex. Now I'm looking at a 3-hour chart here. And Bitcoin, it continues to be difficult to get a good Elliott count on it. It's done exactly the opposite of what we might have anticipated going into the last, really 12 hours. So let's try and get a handle on it just by, I'm not going to strip this bare because I think there are things that we can look at here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. I'm going to work from that pivot as we go over here. So if we analyze this and if we've got our Elliott hats on in terms of where is it advantageous to us, and how can we use the rule set and the tendencies of Elliott's theory to help us identify where we may be. So this is the most recent count that I have on it, and I would tell you this was the thought that we might have a WXY was sort of sparked by a comment I got from a viewer on YouTube. So thanks for that. We don't know if it's ultimately going to be our final count, but it definitely makes some sense in here. So if we look here now, so one of the things that is going all the way back here from this swing here, we can see that for the most part, the fives, so if we think fives and threes, right? So that's where we start with Elliott. Where are the fives, where are the threes? Well, with this 5 wave down here, so we do get 5 here to complete the C, but then we get the 3 here. Most of these fives, and certainly here as we've gone through this correction, the fives have been down. So it's a process. It's a bit of a process of elimination here. So this has been very problematic for any Elliott trader to try and get a good count on this, because it could be too many different things. So right now, what I'm seeing here as a contender is that we've got this A wave down here. We do get our 3-wave B, but then see, here's the problematic leg here. So because it's tempting to want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can't do that because this leg here is our shortest leg. So this is where Elliott's rule set can be helpful to us, because it forces us to think beyond the obvious. So this cannot be our 3rd wave, but it is a very clear, clean 5. So what does that leave us? Well, it's either a 1 or an A wave. So as we come down out of this, so that's why I think there may be some merit to this ABC completing a W here. We get a very clear 3 waves here, very clear, no question about what we have there, into an X wave, which would set up an ABC to follow. Well, that's all good. That's all well and fine, and was playing just beautifully until we get this price action. So Bitcoin continues to make it difficult. So if we look here, so that plays as an A wave. It's there. This is pretty abrupt, but there's this hesitation here would give us a 3-wave structure for a B wave. Then going down, then we get the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Now there was some question going in. So if I take this off here, so there was question. Let's take all of this off. So you can see here's where it's gotten very difficult to get a read on this, because it's certainly reasonable if we look at the scaling and the symmetry here to suggest that this is 1, 2, here's the big 3, and there's subdivision within it. Here's the 4 and here's the 5. So that was one thought. The other was that this was our 4, because just like this B, see how this leg here, this wave looks very, very similar to this one. So there was the possibility here that this wasn't done, that this had one more leg down, and that we had some complexity in our 3rd here. This was a 4. It was technical, went right where you'd expect it. So if I pull from my 2 to what we thought perhaps was our 3 low, here's our 4 right at the 38, right where you'd expect it. And then there is a 5 coming down here. So I'm on a 3-hour. If we go down to a 1-hour, it's there. There is a 5 wave, but that would set up a truncated 5th. So certainly it's possible, right? It's unusual after that kind of price action, but what's usual with Bitcoin? It's from if you think Elliott in terms of long-term tendencies, it would be unusual to get a truncated fifth, especially when we have this all set up to come down here and resolve and set up a double bottom, a tap in the median line, the algo target. It was all there. So how do we reconcile what we're seeing here? Well, see, this is where, I know a lot of traders, I'm going to take this off here because I'm kind of giving away the story. A lot of people thought we had this coming, that this was all set up for one more push down and that we had a triangle. And so we were going to end up with something like this, A, B, C, D, maybe into the E. So perhaps we had a triangle here, A, B, C, D, E. Right? It's very common in the fourth, which would have set up this move down here. Well, what do we get? The exact opposite. Right? I know a lot of short sellers were looking at that where we're just salivating, oh, how perfect. We've got the perfect triangle. It's all set up. We break of the trend line. So if you were trading that as you should have been, if you were looking for the short, if you broke out of that heading down, that was a reasonable place to get short because you could go back a pivot and have reasonable risk reward here at this pivot here. So one of two things happened. Either you didn't get filled because you didn't get a break of the lower trend line. So hopefully that was your experience. And the breakout here has to cause you to rethink the whole thing. So is this possible? So, you got to look at it and go, could that be what we're experiencing? Well, I think, everything's subject. Everything is potentially there. That would be very surprising for a couple of reasons. One, look at the difference in time and the complexity here of the 4 to the 2. It's too big relative to the second. This is much more consistent right here. So you got to look at that and go, oh, okay, so is the truncated fifth in play? Or are we all the way back over here to where we started, looking at this coming up just shy here of the median line? And that potentially here we have a 1, 2, 1, 2, and now we've gone into a 3. Well, how are we going to know? Well, we're not going to know. We're not going to know until we see what happens. So this will become an important pivot right here. Right here, and you can see we get a relatively low volume node. So likely that's going to get retested. If this comes down here and we hold, then we have potentially, just potentially, this setting up to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, and takes us out as a 5. Now we get some structure we can work with because now we're not unsure. We're not guessing. Could it be? Is that if we come out of here in 5, then we have, depending on whether we overlap here, we have a motive wave, right? So it's either going to be an impulse or a leading diagonal. We can't tell yet. So we've got to see what happens here. So all we can do is look at this and do what we would do in any second to third, draw it up. Say, well, what do we get? Well, it would be unusual for it to go as deep as the wave 1 high here, which would be a test of the 618. We know a 4 much more likely up here at the 38, or if it's going to go deep, 38 to the 50. So if we're going to go into a diagonal, then we got to go back a pivot, or even all the way to the absolute low, because we're a little unsure about where our technical pivot is down here, because we don't really have one. So all we can do is kind of look at this and go, well, let's see what happens at the 38. Are we going through the 38? Are we just going down to where algos we know we'll buy it? So we'll get this kind of reaction here. We come down, tap the 50, and then head up here. That would be ideal, right? Certainly ideal for bulls. And if you're looking for a trade, that is a very tradable event. Should we come down here and test the 50? Because you know you're going to have algos on board. So a reasonable place to be a buyer. But keep in mind, this is why stops and money management is so critical here. Let's take that off. Since we can't be sure about this, and we still have this as a bit of a contender. So first question you go was, all right, well, why does it stop here? So whenever I'm looking at a pivot, first question I ask is, well, why does it stop there? What is significant about this pivot point? Well, so I'm just going to grab fibs and start pulling. So here, potentially, this second to this potential fifth low, well, what do? We literally tag the 618. So there's your reason as to why it stops there. But we can also look at this and say, okay, well, that's one, but maybe there's some more confluence here. So if I go all the way back to the B wave here, is that telling me anything? Essentially the same thing. It would be you'd be evaluating to say, well, it was a front run on the 618. So if we took that off, right, and we go just back one pivot, does it look any different? Not really. How about if we go all the way to the start of the X wave? Now that's kind of interesting. So is this a front run on the 50 off of this pivot up here where we have this 5 wave, this 3 wave, and then this 5 wave? You know, the other thing that you might immediately be thinking here is that this is 1 because we've got clear 5 waves. Here's our B, and then we come down in 5 again. So you might be thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if this were a 1 here, as I've labeled it as A, so now you're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's a diagonal. Right? Maybe it's an ending diagonal. The reason I don't think that's likely is because diagonals are shaped in 3s, not in 5s. And we have 2 very, very clear 5-wave structures here. There is no question about whether or not that's a motive wave. And this, in fact, is impulsive, as is this. So we get impulse wave followed by impulse wave. Now, to go into a diagonal here and revisit all of this, I just don't see it because we're getting clean 5s, not 3s, which is characteristic of a diagonal. So while that, you know, it has to be somewhere, it would be a count that you might maintain it as a remote alternate. But I just do not see it based on this price action, which has me thinking that what we've got here now is a real breakout to the upside, and that this perhaps remains unresolved. So if we look at this, so if I wiggle this here, okay, so so you see that. So we have to be conscious of that. So there is certainly the potential, regardless of how we count it with our Elliott hats on. That's just a straight algo trade. There's a major pivot to a major pivot to a 50. That's a front run on the 50. They've got a target down here. Right? That's just a reality. There is software that has already sold it going into the 50, right? Look at the long wick that goes up, it gets filled, and then they have this target down here. Now, just because that target is there does not mean that it will be realized, but we can't ignore it. So you know, I would want to look at this and say, well, is there some Elliott count that would play there that would have me coming back down here to resolve one more time and approach that target? Well, not without something happening here that would be outside of normal tendencies. Let's say it that way. So, is it still possible? Yeah, of course it's possible. But is it likely? Which we as traders, that's all we get. Is it likely? Is it what are the probabilities suggest? What does the pattern imply? So we want to see what happens, but we just can't rule that out until we get really, you got to get a break of this one. You got to get a break from here. We got to get over that 65. Then we have algos on our side. Right now we do, of course, you always got to, you got to know they're there. You're going to deal with the all the way halfway back. Right? So if it's swing high to swing low, you will run into resistance right here. And you'll run into ongoing resistance right there. So all of that is there. You can't just ignore them and go, oh, well, we got through this one, so it's clear sailing. No, you got to check them all. That's because an algorithm won't care about what you think is going on with an Elliott wave perspective. It's just software written to sell the 50s, defend the 618. Now, if we can get that to flip, then we get them on our side, right? So that we got to get on the other side of that. Then we're set for the next 50 coming down. That's, you want to be conservative. That's the big buy, right? If we can get that, now we got algos. We'll be buyers on the next retrace at the 50. So potentially now we can get something started here that's a motive wave, and we catch the next 50. Too soon to call it, right? So too soon to call it. So, if you're a bull, as I am, this is very encouraging because it really, really was set up for that last push down. Right now, the interesting thing is we've stayed above this pivot, right? As I've often said, that was going to be the critical pivot here. It makes me a little uneasy. Well, so you think about the depth of it, right? So if we just look at the swing from the low to the high, all right, here's our 70. Even if I put the 887 on that. Even if we go 887, well, I suppose you can, it's close. So we stayed in that range. We tap, and now finally we're pushing out of it. So technically, and my point is, technically we still have an internal retracement. And this failure to reach the median line here, because this push to the median line has been very consistent, the failure to make the median line sets up for trading principle number 4, that of course is a big part of what we teach in the room. Trading principle number 4, a failure to make the median line sets up a move equal to or greater than the swing that preceded that move that failed. So that would be equal to or greater than this pivot here, right, as we don't make the median line. So could that be setting up for us? Yeah, well, it implies strength. It implies strength, but of course we got to get through this parallel here to the median line. So it's a contender. That would be additional confirmation. If we can breach this pivot here, that all the more solidifies this pivot down here. You know, this is the mystery pivot down here. Why do we come this far? Why do we stop there? Well, you know, you can dig into some of these and there may be some technical pivot. I'd like to see it. I would prefer to see it on one of the larger swings. So if I'm just checking them, if I look here, is that close enough? Well, here, so let me take this. Let me get this cleared up a little bit. Let's get the 887 off of there. Okay, so if I have this now off. Okay, so I'm here. Here's my 38. Is that, it's just not ideal, right? So here's the 38. You know, that's a bit of a stretch to call that a front run. We do come right to the Vegas wave, which I always like to see. Then down we come. You know, too strong to get there. You know, maybe we'll see what happens here if indeed we come back and we retest this pivot here at we'll call it 7,300. If that gets a retest, you know, this is still down here. We have to respect that. But you know, this will be a real tell. And it's kind of a wait and see. So if you're not currently long, you're looking for opportunity, you got to make a decision. You know, do you want to be a buyer here? If this were to play as a 1-2, this is going to be a significant pivot, so there's an opportunity here. I wouldn't ride that down too far, because you're basically trying to buy it on the assumption that this pivot is going to hold. So no need to go, take it deep or, be below this pivot. I would keep that relatively tight, because we just, as I've shown you, right, we don't know that we're not going down here. So no reason to ride that all the way down and risk that. I'd be conservative on the stop. So just pulling here, let's go to the hourly and look at it before I wrap up here. So we can see a little bit more of this structure. This you can see it here. If I blow this up here, this is what gives some credibility to this, because you can see we get a very clear 5-way. Let me put this in white. So we get the 5 ways here. We get it. All right, let's make that. Go down a degree. All right, so we can get the 5 waves down here. Right, but it sets up the truncated fifth. So if I get these kind of dialed in, probably dial that right there. So this is our key pivot. So maybe that looks like potentially you've got a 5 wave. That actually looks, yeah, so you get a little diagonal there. So it looks like we've got a 1-2. So you might look at this and say, okay, that could be a 1. So 1, deep 2, then 1, 2, 3 potentially. So we'd have a couple of targets. So here, if this is 1, 2, we've already gotten to the 100%. So we know the 1, 6, 1, 8 is going to be very close. So we have the potential now, just the potential for this to be 1, 2, 3, going down for the 4, and we finish in a 5. So if we have that, let's do it this way. Let's just, this again, as I will often tell you, it's the same thing, same way every time. Okay, there we go. So that we don't really have the 3-wave subdivision just yet, but I would say this is going to be a very significant pivot. Likely all of this gets tested. So there's going to need to be some testing here. So do we come here to this prior resistance, potentially, nothing more than potentially offering some support here? Do we get this kind of a range here? Prior resistance. Get it right in there. Prior resistance offering us some support here at the 38. That's a contender. You certainly would like to see the 3-wave subdivision, whether we get there or not. I want to see something like that. that's ideal, right? So since we know the potential is for this thing to break and go lower, I would like to see the 3-wave subdivision. So it would not be surprising at all that the A wave, this kicks in here, this prior resistance provides some support for an A wave. Then we get a little push up for the B. That's an attempt to get to the highs. If that rolls over, then we're set up beautifully for the 4 to the 5. So we got to just wait and see. It's too soon to be celebrating, but it's certainly a good sign. Certainly a good sign for bulls. So we'll see. Let's just can't resist it here before we get out, wrap it up here. So got to get a pitchfork on it. Well, that's not going to be the right one, of course. So let's get back to original. All right. So I'd be paying attention to that. Right. And can we get up here for our 5th? Is that taking us up here? But I'd want to draw it this way as well. So I'd check both of them. So that's going to be steep, of course. So I'd want to get up to the 2.5, cover it. Yeah, 2.5 gets it. Okay, so we've got that. So this return to the median line here would not be surprising, and also that I would pay attention to that. Those are 3 pivots that are relative right now to this swing. So do we come over here? Are we back to the median line here? What kind of a 3-wave structure do we get? Does it set up well with a 4? Algo's at the 50. We got all sorts of ingredients setting up there to give us more confirmation that we're coming out of the hole here with a motive wave, that we get a good clean 5. So all things to be watching. A little too soon to be overly aggressive here, but very encouraging signs. All right, guys, I'll wrap it.